Hi there, welcome back to Apatros Review. In this episode, Coronaween Part 3, Trespassers, directed by Ian McCrudden in the year 2005, the subject for Coronaween Part 3. Hi there, welcome back to Apatros Review. I'm your host, Miller Sipka, and join me as I take you on a ride through the wild world of science fiction action horror, all from my personal DVD collection of a ton of DVDs, plus a few Blu-rays, videotapes, TV shows, and video games, even a few books. Now, this is basically the third installment of Coronaween, which is what I created to mark the Halloween of 2020, which is the year of the coronavirus pandemic, hence the title Coronaween, get it? Now, I know a lot of you out there having problems with health and problems with lockdowns in several places. At least the lockdown in Victoria is pretty much gone now, but there's still a few restrictions. I hope they open up fully. And, trick-or-treating this year will be pretty difficult for some people, and you're not going to get too many lollies, and people are going to pretty much give you a hand sanitizer for each house. So I decided to create a Coronaween just to mark the occasion and to give you a little bit of enjoyment on what is a stressful year for all of us. Now, the film for this the first two episodes I did of Coronaween, the first one I did review a British lesbian vampire film called Temptation from 2009. If you want to get that, it was originally released on a rental label from Peacock Films, and then released on a dirt cheap budget label Flashback Entertainment. The second episode dealt with I Spit on Your Grave 3, Vengeance is Mine, which was the third film in the post-millennial I Spit on Your Grave trilogy. It's actually the best one of the trilogy so far, if many people don't consider that as much. In this episode, by the way, you can find I Spit on Your Grave 3, Vengeance is Mine on Australian DVD from Defiant Screen Entertainment. It's the only title from Defiant that I have in my collection, so you're not going to see that label getting reviewed here anytime soon. Now, in this episode, we look at the film Trespassers, which was directed by Ian McCrudden in 2005, released on DVD on 2006. It's a film that's set in Mexico and practically deals with a group of vacationers, holiday makers, facing against creatures that could be considered zombies if you play in a loose way. Now, Trespassers it's a horror indie. It was a very early entry in the 2000s horror catalog, and one of the first entries in the post-millennial zombie boom that started around 2003 with the likes of Resident Evil 28 Days Later, and went on to populate the 2010s. Although zombie films have now become almost run to the ground by the point of 2020, even for Charles Band, the Full Moon Supremo, pretty much made the first Corona-related film with Corona zombies, where it essentially took the footage from Hell of the Living Dead, or To the Brits of Zombie Creeping Flesh, that Bruno Mattei film. I'll review in a years from now, hopefully, future, and basically redubbed it and add some new footage. Interesting film. I'm going to try and see if I can get a copy of that. Now, for the story, a group of friends take a road trip to Mexico on the lookout for a secluded beach where they heard that the waves are so epic so they'll make a ripper of a surfing session, and the best part is that there are no locals to get in the way. But upon reaching the spot, which is known by the locals as a point of open eyes, they find absolutely nobody there except for a pile of bleached human skeletons on the rocks next to the beach, and an empty car with all the food eaten but the money and valuables still there. What they don't realize is that the beach is cursed by an undead cult leader. Apparently there was a cult there that lived there years before, and the leader actually because that place is so barren, you can't even fish there. There's nothing to find food there. It's a very godforsaken spot. And so the cultists, when they realized that the food he was given was actually human children cooked up, they punished him very severely, very harshly, and he made a deal with the devil to basically haunt the beach from now on. And this guy basically prowls the area, judging those he encounters with his glowing red eyes, and cursing those who are unworthy of salvation into shakals, which are humanoid creatures of a terminal hunger that cannot be quenched. Basically humans with a terminal case of the munchies, believe me. And this causes them to be constantly eating of a taste of the living flesh. They don't care what food it is, they just eat it. Soon the group find themselves under attack from the bloodthirsty shakals. Now, to be perfectly honest, Trespassers, what with the grainy cheap digital camcorder look and mediocre soundtrack, feels exactly like one of those ultra-cheap productions where a group of novice filmmakers team up with their friends a little cash and head somewhere to make their own horror epic, only with their enthusiasm stripping their talent, and to the point that you're not going to be mistaking this thing for a classic. which is a shame since there have been plenty of classic no-budget horror films over the years, from Carnival of Souls to Night of the Living Dead to The Evil Dead to Paranormal Activity and so on. This type of enterprising lo-fi approach won't ever end for as long as the horror genre remains alive and well. In fact, the horror genre pretty much is a genre that allows people, it caters to low-budget filmmakers. It's not like you can make a romantic comedy on the low budget, or, some comedies, yeah, but romantic comedies or action films, horror films, you can make them as cheap as you can, they'll still be interesting, as long as you get the story right. In the case of Trespassers, we have a rather simple setup, with a director and writer Ian McCrudden proving he knows a thing or two about genre tropes, even offering an interesting twist on the zombie genre with fast-moving zombie-like creatures known as shakals, which are essentially, like I said, humans afflicted with a supernaturally applied curse that makes them permanently hungry. For those who like to watch films about stoned, you know how you get a case of the munchies? Well, these guys have munchies all day long. And they are bugger of a deal to take down as well. That being said, the film is pretty rough to sit through. The grainy picture makes things annoying if you're one of those high-definition junkies, but if you're one of the rare few who doesn't care about the clarity being so mediocre as long as you can decipher the picture, this won't bother you that much. And the handheld camera work does can cause motion sickness in people who are sensitive. Now, Trespassers is a film that could have gained my passable rating C+, were not for the fact that the exposition that explains the history of the cult that lived in the area before, and the nature of the shakals is gone twice. They actually explain things twice. First, for a wise Mexican who lives nearby, who basically tells the whole story in Spanish, and this film doesn't have any subtitles, or at least the DVD doesn't. And then the protagonist's girlfriend basically explains to him with flashbacks the story in English, but she doesn't include every single detail. The flashbacks pretty much do that. You know those films where you watch a flashback and the person is only narrating some of the time? So, the film would have been better if they put the explanation in the original Spanish one with subtitles and with a flashback instead of having just replaying it twice. So people who speak Spanish are going to have problems, repeating the same footage over and over again. The shakal attacks are reasonable enough, although the ending is a bit abrupt. As it stands, it's a strictly average film. In other words, this film gets a C, a 4 out of 10. So it's an average film. It's not truly a zombie film, but it's close. Now for the gore, there are some skeletons and a single-frame depiction of bloody corpses that coil on a camcorder. Not exactly that gory, since the director's budget probably didn't allow him to spare a trip to the local butcher, but the way it was worked around was pretty decent. Now there's one decent pair of boobs in this film, that's all. Now for the DVD. This is one of the titles released onto the region for rental market by 21st Century Pictures. No, not the rebranded 20th Century Fox. No, this is a rental market label that started in the early 1990s putting out VHS tapes. And they were actually, by the way, if you're a fan of the film Beach Based from Beyond, which I'll review sometime next year, the Australian VHS, which came from 21st Century Pictures, was uncut. It was the unrated version. Whereas the British DVD, just about all other home video releases around the world, were the censored version, standard version. So if you can find the Australian videotape of Beach Based from Beyond, keep it and have it converted to DVD as soon as you can. I actually had mine converted, but the quality wasn't that great. Anyway, and Cybertracker was also another one of the early titles, before moving on to DVD when the time was right. They lasted until the early 2010s and went defunct after the end of the rental market. Now, as I've already mentioned, the picture and sound quality here is pretty average, although not bad enough to be considered problematic, although the grainy cheap camcorder nature of footage can be annoying. If you watch this on high definition TV with a Blu-ray player, anything capable of upscaling it, it'll look reasonable, but there's still some problems with grain. The color is pretty washed out, but not to the level of something like the catalog of that short-lived $10 label Ninth Dimension, which many of Ninth Dimension's DVDs had some pretty bad color washing, washed out colors. And the English soundtrack on this film is lacking some finesse. There are no subtitles, which is a real shame given the substantial amount of Spanish spoken in the film, and the only supplement are free preview trailers for other films in the label's catalog. So Trespassers gets a C, 5 out of 10. It's average at best. And I hope you enjoyed that. Now there's one more episode of Coronaween left to go, and next one I'm gonna do. The last film for Coronaween is going to be one of the worst, probably my candidate for the worst film I've ever made. Not the most offensively awful, but just the general worst. I'll give you a clue. The most famous episode of MST3K is centered around this. In fact, this, if it wasn't Mystery Science Theater 3000, this film would never be known about. I'll let you guess what that is. And it will come shortly after this one, so keep watching. So stay safe, enjoy Halloween, and that's it for this review.